Hey guys, all right, so part 2, we're in the kitchen. Get your gloves on and get ready. I've already got my dyes mixed for the most part. I'm probably gonna add a little bit more black in just to make sure it gets really black. I've got the black, got purple, and the teal. Already mixed. Now, I will say, I've learned a lot about dyeing, and one thing that I did learn is if you take the time to pre-mix your dyes and strain them and let them cool and then use them, it makes a world of difference filtering them. I just use pantyhose, and I put the pantyhose over these mason jars after I put the citric acid in, and then I put the dye in, and then I fill it up with the hot water, and I mix it up, and then I let it cool, and I just put pantyhose over it and strain it through and put it into another mason jar, then switch it back into the original mason jar it was in so I can keep a bunch of dye stock. So I will say, if you do take the time and you filter it, it does make a huge difference in the way your dye comes out, the way it looks. So we have let our yarn sit in citric acid all night. I like to let it sit for a while. I found the longer I let it sit, the better saturation of color I get, and just the overall better look of the dye. It just looks so much better if you actually take the time and let it sit and do its thing. I might overdo it, but I know that I've let it sit for 15 minutes and I got not so great of color, versus when I let it sit for a while and then I dye it, it sucks up a ton of color and it's super saturated. So I will give you that secret. I do have another video that I did make of how I made the red, black, and orange dyes, which I will post, but we're doing this one first because this one is just easier for me to release first. So we need to take these out and get all the water out. So I'm gonna flip the camera around and show you how I do that. Okay, so we're gonna take these out. Now I have all of my designated pots and pans, and even the strainer that I have in here is designated for dyeing. Everything that I use to dye, I do not use for food. You want to keep it separate, because you don't need to put your yarn in and then get food all over it. So all we need to do is get all of this excess water out. So that's what we're going to do here. You don't want to wring it. You just want to squeeze it. So I just kind of wrap it into my hand. And that soapiness in that water is the synthropol. Synthropol is huge when you're dyeing. It helps the dye take, and it will make sure you have no bleeding after of the colors. I use it every single time and it never fails. I've actually bought yarn from people before that hand dyed, and they did not use synthropol, and I was going to use it while I was crocheting, and I ended up with blue all over my hands. So if that ever happens to you, just wash that yarn in synthropol and it will get rid of all that excess dye and make sure you don't end up with teal and blue hands like I did.
So as you can see, all that excess water is now out. Now we just have to do that to the other skein. Just squeeze all that excess water out. So when we stick it in the dye pots, getting all of this water out of it, it's going to make it suck all that dye out of the water. Because now that it's wet, it's going to want to soak it all up. It's just a little bit wet. So when it's dry, it's going to really, it's not going to be fully dry, which is going to allow those dyes to permeate through the yarn, versus if you were to just stick like dry yarn in a dye bath, it wouldn't do much of anything for you. You want to make sure it's a tad wet, but not soaking wet. You want to really make sure you get that excess water out. And it seems like we are good to go. I just like to make sure it's all pretty even for the most part. Sometimes you end up with that like one piece that you accidentally snagged and it's kind of hanging loose from the hank, but you'll be fine.
So now we're gonna get these dye pots ready. Make sure you are protected, because you never know, you could get splash up. I have actually had something splash up into my eye before, and it is not fun. It actually went up under my glasses, to be honest. So make sure you're careful. I didn't do it with dye, but I did do it with wood stain, when I was staining the yarn boxes that I make, and now my left eye has forever been like partially stained on the bottom. It's like slightly not white on the bottom anymore. So just remember safety, remember your gloves, remember your glasses, and be safe. I know that I don't have a mask on right now. I should have a mask on, but I am in a well-ventilated area. I'm gonna turn on my vent, and I'm gonna open all the windows and turn the fans on so it's nicely ventilated. You want a nicely ventilated area when you're doing something like this. So we're gonna get our dyes. I'm doing 2 skeins of yarn right now, so I need to make sure I have a good amount of dye in these pots. And I've noticed that the teal actually really takes to the yarn very well. So I want to make sure that that's nice and saturated. And just add extra water in there so both of the skeins of yarn can sit in there and have enough to actually sit in. And this will just get all the rest of the dye out of this. So that is our teal. Our teal is in. Now for the black. Now, when these are sitting, they sometimes tend to, like, you'll see, I saw red actually at the bottom, so just make sure that you shake them up
get all your dye stock situated here. Now, the last time I dyed, I actually poured the exhausted dye back into this, so I'm going to add a little bit more black into that pot. Just to make sure that it's super black. I know I said to make sure that you strain, but that's definitely black. Now we're gonna do the purple. Super full. I'm just going to add a little more water. So now we've got a little bit of heat going. So I'm just going to be moving it from pot to pot to make sure that the dye takes to the yarn. See how that purple's coming out? It just has steam coming off of it. So that means it's starting. So we're going to dip that into the teal. Take this and stick it in the teal. Take that purple. And just move it from pot to pot as it gets hotter. And you'll get the dye to transfer onto the yarn. You just got to play with it a little bit when you do it this way. Some people do it in pans. I don't really want to use my stove for things like that. I'd much rather not. So I'd rather do it like this, and I get exact color changes this way versus like drops of certain colors melding with other colors and creating other colors. I want perfect stripes. So I'm doing it this way. It might take a little bit longer, but it's worth it in the end because it really does come out very nice. You'll see at the end. I'll show you some pictures of the finished product. All right, one more time. I'm gonna check. Oh yeah, that is black. Black as black can be. Alright. That purple is a nice deep purple. Oh yeah, super black. So now, just need to turn it off and let it cool. And once it's cool, we'll take it out, wash it, and reskein it, and I'll show you the end result.